25 March 2007 was just another Sunday in Ichikawa, Japan, just north of the capital, Tokyo. On the balcony of an unassuming fourth-floor apartment was a detachable bathtub filled to the brim with sand. Seeds lay strewn roughly on the soil as if hastily left before being planted. Among the seeds, protruding from the tub like a sunflower seeking the sun, was a hand. This hand belonged to Lindsay Ann Hawker, a 22-year-old English teacher living in Japan. The apartment, owned by Tatsuya Ichihashi, who used to cross-dress as a woman often, would soon become the focus of a haunting criminal case. Tatsuya was a 28-year-old man with sinister secrets and a sick killer who would lead Japanese police down a nearly 3-year manhunt that shocked not only Japan, but the whole world. Lindsay was a vibrant, fun-loving young woman with a promising future. Her life was cut short by a selfish man with a disturbed mind. This is their story. Japan is an idealized and romanticized country with fans all over the world. The country has a uniquely and simultaneously futuristic and ancient culture that's undeniably fascinating. Japan is also one of the safest countries in the world, according to the 2023 Global Peace Index, which indicates that Japan is the 9th safest country globally. This is likely why Lindsay Hawker wanted to spend time there teaching English. Lindsay was born on Sunday, December 30, 1984. Her parents, Julia and Bill Hawker, provided her and her two sisters, Louise and Lisa, with a good childhood. She attended King Henry VIII School, a co-educational private school located in Coventry. Once she was done with her basic education, she earned a place at the University of Leeds to study biology. Lindsay was a dedicated student, and in 2006, she earned a first-class honors grade. This is the highest honors degree you can achieve and reflects how serious Lindsay was about her studies and future. At the same time, she managed to be popular and adored, with a thirst for life. Lindsay wanted to try something new while gaining life skills and experience, and decided to take a year out of a busy schedule to see the world. Although she still wanted to earn her master's degree, Lindsay felt that her taking a break from her studies would give her a new perspective on life. In October of 2006, she joined Nova English School, one of the leading private English schools in Japan. Lindsay was assigned a teaching role in Chiba, on the edge of Tokyo. She moved into an apartment with 2 other teachers, and the 3 of them would soon become quite close. Lindsay enjoyed her stay in Japan, having a good time and creating many fond memories. Being so far from home, Lindsay used Skype and Facebook to stay in touch with her family and friends. She was also in regular contact with her boyfriend, Ryan Garside, who remained in England. No one had any reason to worry about her. All of that changed in 2007 during an awkward encounter in front of a railway by a man named Tatsuya Ichihashi. Tatsuya Ichihashi lived in Ichikawa but was born in Gifu Prefecture on 5 January 1979. Not much is known about Tatsuya's childhood because his parents were tight-lipped about his earlier years, but Tatsuya was supposed to follow in his parents' footsteps and become a doctor like his father or a dentist like his mother. However, he failed his exams and was denied advancement of his studies. He then settled for a degree in horticulture and graduated from Chiba University. Despite earning a degree that could get him a decent job, Tatsuya chose not to go out and find work. Instead, he lived on an allowance of 100,000 yen, which is more or less about $640 a month that he received from his parents. Tatsuya was a loner with an obsession with physical fitness. He regularly went to the gym and he cycled around 25 kilometers a day. Although he had no convictions before meeting Lindsay, he had been accused of theft and injury 6 years prior. In this incident, Tatsuya had allegedly assaulted a woman on a street during a robbery, but the matter was settled out of court. While completing his studies, his university gave Tatsuya a formal warning for stalking a woman. He also had an interest in disturbing and violent manga. But as most other fans of darker stories and manga will attest to, this doesn't make a person a dangerous murderer. By 2007, there were actually signs that his mental health was deteriorating. Apparently, he told acquaintances that he was becoming unstable. It's not clear if anyone took the time to suggest that he get some help. At the time Lindsay and Tatsuya met for the first time, Tatsuya had been in a year-long stable relationship with an unnamed Japanese woman. His girlfriend worked at Tokyo Disneyland, and he apparently liked her so much that he chose to write his graduation thesis about the landscaping at Disneyland. The two appeared to have taken many trips together and from the outside looked like a happy couple. Despite this, their relationship wasn't perfect. On numerous occasions, he was said to have entertained the idea of ending their relationship. Considering all of these things, it was quite obvious that something was off about him even before he set his sights on Lindsay. Tatsuya had developed an obsession with Lindsay even before they had met. He had stalked her for several months before he worked up the courage to go and approach her. He had spotted the logo for the school where she taught on her tote bag and used it as an excuse to make a connection with her. This was not the first time Tatsuya had had his eyes on a woman with nefarious thoughts in his mind. He had stalked another British woman and followed her after asking her to help him with his English. The woman, who remains unnamed, returned to Britain after this incident. Tatsuya clearly had a disturbing fixation with foreign women. During Tatsuya and Lindsay's first meeting, Tatsuya approached her and claimed to be one of Lindsay's students. She didn't recognize him, however, so she politely excused herself and continued to collect her bike. However, Tatsuya was persistent and continued to follow her even after she had jumped on her bike and began to cycle away. Lindsay sped up, obviously a bit freaked out by the man's behavior, but he simply picked up his pace and started to jog after her. Unfortunately, because of Chiba's many roads and intersecting walkways, she found it impossible to shake off her persistent follower. Lindsay still tried to get away from him, but eventually reached her apartment. She had to stop her bike and the man caught up with her. Introducing himself as Tatsuya Ichihashi, he said he had a proposal for her. Despite his weird behavior, Tatsuya seemed innocent enough and Lindsay listened to what he had to say. He asked her to give him English lessons because he felt like he needed some help with the language. Tatsuya said that they could meet up in a neutral place, a cafe, and he would pay her for her time. Lindsay was already a busy person with a tight schedule, and she didn't feel like offering up her free time, so she politely declined his offer. Although Tatsuya was disappointed, he seemed to accept her answer. Before leaving though, he asked her for one last favor. Claiming that he was thirsty after chasing her down, he asked if she could give him a glass of water. Naturally, Lindsay was reluctant, but since she had two roommates, she figured it would be okay to let him in. It was a good way to show him that she wasn't alone, and it gave her friends an opportunity to see his face in case he did become a nuisance in the future. The two entered her apartment, and while drinking the water, Tatsuya once again made Lindsay an offer. He promised to pay her 3,500 yen, which is about $22 an hour. He also added that the interaction would be strictly business. Lindsay briefly thought about it, and figuring that the extra cash would be welcome, she agreed to meet him at a coffee shop a few days later. Before leaving, Tatsuya thanked her and said he wanted to give her one last thing. He whipped out a piece of paper and started scribbling on it. A few moments later, he handed her the note. On the note, it was a sketch of her that he had just drawn, with his name and phone number on it. In the early morning of March 25, on the day that Tatsuya was scheduled to meet Lindsay for English lessons, Tatsuya's girlfriend had been at his apartment. The two had an argument until 3 a.m. until she left, but apparently she sat fuming in her car for the next 2 hours in the apartment's parking lot before finally going home. Tatsuya, while still feeling jilted from his massive fight with his girlfriend, went to sleep, and then later on in the day, he proceeded to meet Lindsay and Hawker for their scheduled lesson. Lindsay arrived at the Duto Cafe in East Tokyo. Feeling secure in a public space, she was ready to give Tatsuya the English lesson he seemed to want so desperately. For roughly 50 minutes, things went well. She taught Tatsuya a few things about English, and he remained friendly but never did anything to cause concern. Although Lindsay slightly moved away from Tatsuya a few times during their interaction, she felt comfortable enough to finish the session. However, this was when things took an unfortunate turn. Tatsuya made a show of feeling around for his wallet before claiming he had forgotten it and couldn't pay for the coffee, snack, and the lesson that they just had. Lindsay reached into her bag to pay for the snacks and coffee, and it was likely at this point, still keeping up with his friendly front, that he asked her if she would accompany him to his apartment so he could give her the money that she had worked for. The truth was, Tatsuya wasn't short of money. He had his wallet on him with money. Lindsay agreed, and the two of them got onto a taxi to his place in Ichikawa, which was only a 5-minute drive away. When they arrived at his apartment, she asked the taxi driver to wait for her, explaining that she would be back shortly. As soon as she stepped into his apartment, Tatsuya showed Lindsay his true form, that of a monster with no moral inclinations. He attacked her, doing his best to overpower her. Judging by the way the apartment looked afterward, Lindsay fought back bravely. Her possessions were found and strewn across the room. Both Tastuya and Lindsay were familiar with martial arts. However, Tastuya had earned a black belt, making him the more experienced of the two. Unfortunately, she was outmatched, and Tastuya subdued her before he brutally and savagely R-worded her. He strangled her to keep her from alerting his neighbors, and so he snuffed out her life. The taxi driver, in the meantime, had waited 7 minutes before leaving, assuming that she had changed her mind. The true details surrounding Lindsay's final moments are still somewhat of a mystery, as Tastuya never opened up about exactly what transpired. Her body was found stripped naked, bound and gagged with plastic ties and scarves, and it's not clear if she was still alive when he tied her up. With that said, Lindsay had bruises on her upper body that indicated she suffered a prolonged attack, so it's very likely that Tastuya tied her up in order to torture her. She had egg-sized bruises on the left side of her face, which police believe to have been caused by hits with a fist. Lindsay also suffered bruises to the rest of her body, most likely from collisions with the furniture. Tastuya managed to wrap his hands around her throat, and he broke the cartilage in her neck. Not long after that, she was no longer breathing. As if R-wording and murdering Lindsay were not enough for him, he decided to sadistically shave off all her hair with a razor. Several wigs were found in the apartment, and it's believed that Tastuya liked to dress up in feminine clothes. Perhaps he wanted to wear Lindsay's hair, or worse, he collected it as a trophy, an indication that he would murder more people if he had the chance. After cold-bloodingly ending another human's life, Tastuya moved his detachable tub to the room and put her body inside. He then filled it with sand and soil, as well as a decomposing agent to speed up the process of decomposition. He added flower seeds to the top to disguise the bathtub-turned grave as a flower bed. However, these flowers would eventually feed off Lindsay's body. Tastuya then pushed the tub onto his balcony and walked back into his apartment. At this time, it's not clear what he spent the rest of his time doing. Neighbors told authorities that they heard sounds of something hitting metal and something being dragged down between Sunday night and early Monday morning. The next day, Nova reported Lindsay missing after she had not shown up for work. Her failure to teach her scheduled lessons was noticed, and the school felt something was amiss. Lindsay wouldn't miss lessons without making arrangements first. Before this, her friends had tried to contact the police, but the message about the missing teacher wasn't conveyed to the proper authorities within the department. This fumble greatly, and rightly so, damaged the Japanese police's reputation. After the school had reached out to the police, an investigation was started and the police were able to determine Lindsay's last movements, thanks to the sketch with Tatsuya's name and number, as well as her friends being aware of her meeting. Authorities quickly had a handle of things. 2 police officers were dispatched to Tatsuya's apartment, but the law prohibited them from entering without proper cause. They noticed that there was someone in the apartment, although the lights weren't on. Because the officers were sick of waiting on him, they called for backup. 7 more police officers arrived within the hour. 2 hours later, 9 police officers had assembled. 4 of these police officers were on the 4th floor, waiting to approach his apartment. Tastuya had noticed the cops outside his place, and he decided to sneakily make a run for it. Tastuya figured he could walk right past the police while wearing a rucksack and no shoes. Thinking his casual behavior would fool the police, Tastuya was luckily mistaken and he was noticed before he could completely disappear. An officer grabbed his bag, but the murderer managed to avoid getting himself caught, and he fled the scene. Inside his bag was his gym clothes. For some mysterious reason, the officers were dispersed and they didn't have radios or other ways of communicating with each other, so the cops still outside weren't made aware of the situation. As a result, Tastuya sped down the last few feet of the stairway to the ground and eluded the officers on the ground level. Whether the police officers were out of shape or Tastuya was just a better runner is unclear, but he managed to get away by zigzagging through the street. After Lindsay's body was discovered, the police got an arrest warrant for Tastuya and he was put on a nationwide wanted list. On the same day, Tatsuya's girlfriend went to his apartment with the hope of patching things up between them, but she saw that the police had strung up tape to block off his apartment as a crime scene. The sight of the crime scene tape made her feel full of regret, as she had the feeling that whatever happened could have been prevented if she hadn't have left. The police had lost track of Tastuya and the hunt for him began. This hunt would last years, adding to Lindsay's family's pain. Lindsay's father and boyfriend traveled to Japan to formally identify Lindsay's body. her father stated that he would not rest until his daughter's murderer was caught. Tatsuya's father told the family through the police that he hoped his son would atone for his crime, to which Lindsay's father reacted by saying the message was a hollow gesture. The police believe that Tatsuya may have had connections to the gay community, and on 29 March of 2007, a team of 20 Japanese police officers raided Hotel Chateau, which was a love hotel near Nishi Funabashi Station that was very popular in the LGBT scene for rendezvous and hookups. Police suspected that he was hiding out there, but that proved to be incorrect. After this, it seemed like the investigation hit a brick wall. In June of 2007, Waukesha police flew to Tokyo so that they could help the family liaise with the Japanese police team. At this point, Bill and Julia made a renewed appeal on Japanese TV in which they asked the public to help find the murderer. A month later, the family launched an email campaign and circulated a letter titled, "Don't Forget Lindsay Hawker." They were scared that their child's murder would become another forgotten cold case. In September of 2007, 6 months after her daughter's death, Lindsay's mother handed out leaflets with Tatsuya's face at the London Heathrow airport. Although it's unclear why she did this, no one can blame the heartbroken mother for trying to at least do something for a child's unsolved murder case. In early 2008, the Japanese police investigated sightings of Tatsuya among sections of Kabukicho, an entertainment district in Shinjuku that was apparently popular with the gay community. Here, he was hesitantly identified by former men who he had hooked up with in the past. The police released an updated wanted poster of Tatsuya, which included an enhanced image of him disguised as a woman. The drawing he made of Lindsay on the day they met was also released, in the hopes of someone recognizing his drawing style. The Hawker family was determined to keep Lindsay's name on people's lips and force the Japanese police to continue their investigation. In March of 2008, a year after the murder, they flew to Japan once more to appeal for new leads. During one of their trips to Japan, they unveiled life-size talking cutouts of Tatsuya to raise awareness of the murder and remind the public what he looks like. By October of 2008, 140 officers were involved in the now relatively large investigation. At this point, the police started to suspect that Tatsuya may have taken his own life, to which Lindsay's father rejected by saying this was nothing more than a ploy to scale down the investigation. It has also been reported that Lindsay's father actually traveled to Japan at one point to ask the Yakuza to help find Tatsuya when the police hit a dead end in the investigation. Despite the Yakuza's fearsome reputation, the Japanese mafia didn't prove to be very helpful. Although it looked like the case had gone completely cold by now, there were still reports speculating about Tatsuya's location. Sadly, things went quiet after this, until the following year of 2009. On 15 January 2009, a Japan Today article cited a reporter from Spar magazine and reported that Tatsuya had fled to the Philippines. It was a known fact that Japanese criminals would often flee to the Philippines to avoid capture, making it a safe haven for resourceful lawbreakers. This was not true in Tatsuya's case and was another frustration for Lindsay's family to deal with. In June, the Japanese National Police Agency raised the cash reward for information leading to Ichihashi's arrest from 1 million yen to 10 million yen, which is roughly about $64,000. This was a surprisingly high amount because the typical cash reward for information in serious cases was between 1 million yen to 3 million yen. In November of 2009, now a year and 8 months after Lindsay's murder, new information finally surfaced, and police suspected that Tatsuya had been moving around Japan and was currently in Osaka. The police believed that Tatsuya had undergone plastic surgery to change his appearance and evade capture, showing him looking very different. Tatsuya apparently had undergone lip thinning and had cheek implants. He also went to the Nagoya clinic to have his nose lifted. He also tried to get surgery done in Fukuoka but failed. While on the run, Tatsuya cut off 2 moles on his cheek that were easy to identify. For this, he used a box cutter. He also used a pair of scissors to cut his lower lip, showing just how desperate he was to stay out of prison. Other cosmetic procedures he had undergone included adding folds to his eyelids and using thread that he worked through his nose to alter its shape. Tatsuya took on a false name, worked on construction sites, did odd jobs, and lived in internet cafes to get the money he needed for the plastic surgery he thought would let him get away with murder. After the updated photos of him were released, he knew he had to flee once more, and so Tatsuya left Osaka. He went to Okinawa and took refuge in one of the abandoned concrete bunkers found across its many remote islands. These bunkers are remnants of World War II, as Okinawa Island was the site of one of the bloodiest campaigns in the Pacific during the war. He also stayed in an abandoned hut, living on fruit and fish he caught, and sometimes even sea urchins and snakes. Tatsuya carefully stayed out of sight of cameras at shops and avoided eye contact with anyone. He wore a cap and a face mask at all times. When there was any doubt, he immediately packed up and left. He never contacted his friends or family. But on November 10, 2009, Tatsuya's world came crashing down as he finally was arrested by the police at a ferry terminal. He had made his way to the port and thought he would continue to be lucky and evade the police, but before he could reach the boat, a worker recognized him and informed security of his presence. Not knowing that he was identified and authorities were on the way, he soon came face to face with a handful of officers who asked him to identify himself. At this point, he realized the jig was up and he admitted to being the man they'd been chasing for so long. He was initially charged in December for abandoning Lindsay's body, SA, and murder. Tatsuya's lawyers said that he was threatened with a death sentence if he didn't speak, and claimed that his initial silence was because of stress and fatigue. On 23 December 2009, one of his lawyers announced that Tatsuya had acknowledged that he was involved in Lindsay's death, but he had not intended to murder her and had attempted artificial resuscitation. In September of 2010, Tatsuya apologized to Lindsay's family in a letter that had been published in several newspapers. Lindsay's parents arrived in Japan in July of 2011 for Tatsuya's trial in Chiba. Tatsuya admitted to SAing and strangling Lindsay, but he insisted that he never meant to murder her. He stated that he lured her to his apartment, committed the heinous acts, and only strangled her to keep her silent while he was R-wording her because he was scared the neighbors would call the police if her screams were heard. Tatsuya also claimed that he couldn't remember the actual strangulation. Tatsuya's father asked that Tatsuya be given the heaviest sentence possible under Japanese law, which was the death sentence, but Tatsuya was only given a life sentence on 21 July 2011. The court felt that the death penalty would not be appropriate since Tatsuya had no previous convictions, and at 32, he was still young enough to be rehabilitated. At the start of the trial, Tatsuya, thin, ragged, and shaking under Lindsay's father's gaze, prostrated in front of her parents, bowing repeatedly in an attempt to show his feelings of guilt. Not everyone bought the sincerity behind this move, with some feeling that he just wanted to avoid the death penalty. Although Lindsay's father initially expressed his dismay at the lack of knowledge surrounding Tatsuya's whereabouts during the start of the investigation, he made it clear that he did not want to criticize the Japanese police, and he expressed gratitude after Tatsuya's arrest and sentencing. In November of 2011, while Tatsuya was behind bars, his then ex-girlfriend went to visit Tatsuya in the detention center where he was serving his sentence. Initially, he did not want to meet her, but a former mentor of him told him it would be a good way to take responsibility for his actions. When he saw her, he told her that he's sorry and he bowed his head in accord. The woman had many fond memories of their times together, and she told him that their encounter made it possible for the two of them to dispel any bad feelings between them. Tatsuya knew that his ex was getting married to someone else, and when she asked to visit him one more time, he wordlessly declined, only shaking his head. With so little information available on Japanese prisons, they're much like black holes, draped in mystery. However, a former prisoner, Hiroshi Yamauchi, which is a pseudonym by the way, shared his details about his time in Nagano prison, where Tatsuya also served and still serves his sentence. Hiroshi Yamauchi explained that Nagano prison houses inmates in two categories: Class A, consisting primarily of first-time offenders, and Class B, which includes serious criminals, repeat offenders, and those with antisocial tendencies like Yakuza members. Tatsuya is one of the Class B inmates. According to the former prisoner, he was assigned to work at plant number 10. Based on what Yamauchi knew from those who worked with him, Tatsuya was aloof and only engaged with people he felt comfortable around. Other prisoners were somewhat impressed with how fast Tatsuya was, and many even cheered him on during sporting events, shouting words of encouragement. Yamauchi noticed that some prisoners working at the laundry were mean toward Tatsuya. If clothes with his number arrived to be washed, they would intentionally sew his number tag crudely and inappropriately. Prisoners were also allowed to deposit money to use while serving their sentence, and according to rumors, Tatsuya once deposited around 1 million yen. It is believed that the murderer has many passionate fans and supporters, and some of them may send him money. These simps on the internet looked past Tatsuya's disgusting actions and gave him affectionate nicknames, such like Ichi-sama, which means Lord Ichi, and Tobo Oji, which means the fugitive prince. Some simps online described him as sexy and cute, with others even going as far as posting online how they fantasized about sleeping with him. The police station where he was first arrested and incarcerated also reportedly received many affectionate letters addressed to him. One woman apparently even hand-delivered an album of photos of her dog and herself. Although it is to be expected that the kind of crime Tatsuya committed would attract attention, the fame Tatsuya achieved is almost nauseating. There is truly no accommodating for other people's tastes. Tatsuya's parents also reportedly visited him every month. Their 30 minutes of visiting time was deducted from his prison wages, but Tatsuya appears unconcerned with the loss of earnings as his ample funds enable him to frequently purchase new underwear and socks. He is said to keep 7 sets of clothes that he changes daily, and he replaces worn articles of clothing with new items at the rate of every 1 or 2 months. He wrote a book about his experience, chronicling his time as a fugitive, describing how he spent 2.5 years on the run and how he underwent plastic surgery. The book is titled Until I Got Arrested, a memoir of the missing 2 years and 7 months. The book starts after the crime and doesn't touch on the murder, which is probably a good thing. Though he claims the book was only to tell his story, it really looks like he wanted people to feel sorry for him and maybe even look past his crimes and see him as a smart guy who managed to outrun the police for nearly 3 years. The book has gone on to sell over 100,000 copies, and Tatsuya offered Lindsay's family all the royalties the book may earn, an offer which Lindsay's family rightfully rejected. Media all over the world were obsessed with the case of Ichihashi and Lindsay, and in 2013, a film based on Tatsuya's book was released, titled I Am Ichihashi, Journal of a Murderer. People who watched the film described it as boring and complained that it glorified the actions of a murderer. Others stated that they were left with a bad taste in their mouth because the movie tried to shine sympathy on the cruel crimes of Tatsuya Ichihashi. Tatsuya Ichihashi's case remains one of Japan's most notorious criminal stories, highlighting the dark complexities of human behavior and the disturbing thoughts that can hide behind a friendly smile. Lindsay Hawker's story is a chilling reminder of the lengths to which a disturbed person can go to please their perverse desires and evade justice. Tatsuya's eventual capture and conviction brought some solace to Lindsay's family, but the scars of his crime will never truly heal. As the world reflects on the tragic events and their aftermath, let's remember that Lindsay was a young woman with a promising future, whose biggest mistake was being nice and trusting a stranger. Rather than thinking of this case as the one about a man who disfigured his own face and evaded capture for a long time, let's think about it as the case of Lindsay, whose heart was so big that she showed kindness even when it wasn't deserved. Rest in peace to Lindsay Ann Hawker.